I'm Jake Weatherly, CEO of SheerID. We're an identity marketing platform. We help companies with special programs, both in designing, launching, and managing programs that are designed for the military audience, for first responders, for nurses and doctors on the front lines, teachers, students, and the list goes on and on. I'm excited to spend time today with Taryn Raymond. Taryn's the CMO of FTD. And Taryn, will you give us a quick overview of the FTD mission and describe your role in the organization?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I'm Chief Marketing Officer at FTD. I started in April, so right in the middle of lockdown and before one of our biggest peaks, which is Mother's Day. So it was certainly an interesting time to begin a new role. A little background on FTD. It started in 1910 as a collective of florists who wanted to change the floral industry and give consumers the opportunity to send flowers to loved ones who lived far away. So that was 110 years ago. Orders were sent by telegraph. Obviously, a lot has changed technology-wise since then. So today, consumers can visit ftd.com or proflowers.com to find the perfect gift, which is either crafted and delivered by one of our florists or shipped directly from one of our vendors. So not only are our consumers sort of the obvious.com shoppers, they're also our florist members who send orders that we send orders to and support via marketing and technology as well.
Awesome. So let's open things up talking about how many brands have had to change their marketing playbook and adjust their strategies as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. How's FTD, I guess, first traditionally approached customer acquisition? And then how has COVID changed that?
Yeah, so our approach prior to me joining when it comes to customer acquisition specifically, it was honestly pretty slim. We were spending pretty little, relied on a lot of mid and lower funnel channels to capture demand. We did have some larger scale campaigns that ran during our peak periods like Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, but they weren't really using the best practices or learnings from past or much data in general. So in the spring, when the company brought on a bunch of new leadership, including myself, our first focus was really moving to a data-driven enterprise, which was ever so important even during COVID. We really empowered everyone, no matter what department, with dashboards, consumer insights, really just trying to get all of it out there so everyone had what they needed to get the business moving forward through those times. We also transitioned our ESP to one which allowed us to have more predictive measures and increased segmentation as well. So as I mentioned, we sort of had two consumer groups, the .com and the florists. So we also wanted to make sure that all that marketing lived in one place, no matter who we were speaking to have a cohesive messaging. And all of these changes really just allowed us to fix what was already running. Then we implemented a much more robust acquisition strategy. And COVID in particular really impacted those decisions since we saw a lot of consumer behavior shifts. So for example, we saw more share in non-floral categories such as plants. We saw an increase in self-consumption, a decrease in certain occasions, specifically sympathy. We weren't able to have funerals or things like that during COVID. But then we also saw an increase in more day-to-day occasions. So, we weren't able to be together. So there were no baby showers, weddings, birthday parties. I mean, we just had a lot more to speak to than we normally would have in a non-COVID world. And we just wanted to make sure that we were targeting those audiences appropriately. So yeah.
And what have you learned about your audiences recently? It's an interesting and complex business model, right? We have business to business, business to business to consumer, and business to consumer all sort of nested together at FTD.
Yeah, I mean, what we've learned, other than some of the things that I just mentioned, is really that we need to be nimble, move quickly. Since the consumer shifts were changing pretty drastically from pre to post COVID, we really wanted to make sure that we were moving as fast as we possibly could, especially within our florist network. So, I mean, think about these mom and pop local shops in your neighborhoods. I mean, they were scared. They didn't know what was going to happen during COVID times. So we wanted to make sure that we were being as open with them with what was happening, helping them to really shift their business process as well so they could be successful during those time periods.
Totally makes sense. It's interesting. We're talking about emotionally connecting with consumers in difficult times, right? Not necessarily super easy because of the lack of in-person and face-to-face interactions. So it's just amazing how far you've been able to go and how quickly. And congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So part of our session is to kind of dig into survey results. And one of the things that we found in a consumer survey that was recently kind of analyzed and reviewed is that it indicated that maintaining friendships and social contacts are even more important now than ever. How's FTD made it easier for people to share something special with people close to them?
Yeah, the nature of our business is allowing consumers to be there when they can't physically be there. So you can imagine that that just became even more prominent and necessary during COVID. So that message was and continues to be really heavily voiced in all of our assets. It's tough, like I mentioned, so consumers need to feel more confident in our ability to be able to share that joy as well. So one change is really kind of speaking to, the safe delivery, really speaking to even more self-consumption, which was another piece, just because these other moments that just didn't exist prior to COVID. And we really looked at focusing on those audiences, looking at those in-market groups and ensuring that they see this message.
Okay. And are there specific audiences that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, so I think it was more of day to day. When it comes to either social or Google audiences, looking at those interests within social, and then the search trends within Google to really capture, like I said, so if it's like a baby shower, so like things that we wouldn't typically think to send a gift, it's usually you're there in person. It's really looking at those very niche specific audience groups and making sure they see the message.
Okay, great. So your vision is to be the leading and most trusted floral and gifting company in the world. How do you bring this to life in your marketing and your strategy and your programs and your campaigns?
Yeah, so it's really all in our messaging and creative. We want to make sure we're being cognizant of the restrictions. So, whereas before maybe there was more human interaction in our assets, that we kind of had to remove that when it came to COVID times. So maybe it's a mother receiving an arrangement by herself and just really capturing that joy that it brings to her. We also want to make sure the copy is relevant when it comes to making the buyers feel safe. So contactless delivery, and just really, again, just making sure that we're not speaking to something that people aren't doing. Again, people weren't really together. So we want to make sure we're representing that in everything that we're messaging.
So we have a word at SheerID that we like to use to describe consumer segments. We call them consumer tribes. For example, brands like Lowe's Home Improvement have a strong affinity with their military customers, or Rothy's Shoes with teachers and nurses. Does FTD have a concept of consumer tribes in your marketing?
Yeah, so I think one tribe that we consider is thoughtful gifters. So those who are really trying to, again, they're putting a lot of thought into what they're giving to someone else. It's not like they're just buying a gift card and sending it off. Not that there's anything wrong with that, if you do that. But they want to make sure that they're choosing something that will really bring joy to the consumer, that they're to the recipient that they're sending it to. So we always try to find what their likes are and make sure that we're targeting those appropriately as well.
And it's interesting, you have people sending gifts and then certainly people receiving gifts, and your brand is woven in to the entire experience. What types of programs do you have to build a fan base, to build evangelism, and to have influencers out there recommending that FTD is the place to go to give gifts and the best place to receive gifts from?
Yeah, so aside from the obvious performance marketing channels, we do a bunch of influencer programs as well. So recently we partnered with a bunch of women who were business owners themselves, and really we allowed them to create their own bouquet, and they promoted it on their site or in their channels, and we promoted it on ours. And we found it to be successful in a way to really, make sure that we're continuing to empower those small businesses. So it's not just about the florists too. So yeah, I think that's probably the best example.
That's real engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, so switching subjects slightly, there are many consumers out there who need extra support these days. Sometimes that's financially related. Other times it's about creating a connection or taking care of oneself. How do you build programs that demonstrate to your customers that FTD is with them, is in their corner, if you will?
Yeah, so on the .com consumer side of the business, there's, as you mentioned, there's certainly a revived self-care focus. So it is something that we're certainly messaging to in a lot of our marketing campaigns. Flowers and plants are proven to positively impact someone's mood. So it's an area we've been working in. Not only in the marketing, we also have blogs for both sites, both for FTD and Pro Flowers. So we are constantly pushing out a ton of blog content to keep consumers engaged when it comes to different things like this. We have a ton of content around COVID, how to, make your workspace a more happy space with plants and flowers, things of that nature. So we were doing that on that side. And then I think probably one of the best examples for that question in particular, it has to do with our florist network. So again, they're also our consumers, and we've had an increased focus on ensuring that they're happy with the programs and services that we're providing them. Now that we have combined all of our marketing efforts into one department, we're also just keeping them more in the loop. As I mentioned, they're kind of scared. They don't know what's going to happen. So we want to make sure that we're giving them a bit more guidance. They're losing in-shop traffic. So we want to do our best to try to keep pushing more orders, quality orders to them to ensure that they're also succeeding.
And you were telling me about the sort of delivery window and inviting florists to extend that delivery window in order to receive and then fulfill more orders. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it sort of goes back to, again, if they're losing in-store traffic, they need a little bit more help from the online channels. So one thing that we did was we did allow them to accept more orders within a longer time frame than we had in the past, to sort of, substitute for the orders that they weren't getting in person. We've been updating just other technology features to allow them flexibility and how and when they're accepting the orders as well. And then sending them more qualified orders. Obviously, the more profitable that they can be, the better. So that's also been a huge focus as well.
Great. And so many small businesses, single location, but also like medium and regional businesses as well. So wide variety, I imagine, in terms of the florist network.
Yes, of course. Yes, it is.
So let's wrap with, and our audience always loves to hear, kind of personal growth stories and career path stories. So first, personally for you, Taryn, what has responding to COVID as a business leader, as a strategic marketing leader, taught you thus far personally, to make you stronger and FTD stronger for the future?
Yeah, on a personal level, it's really, it was tough times for everyone. Some of my staff, they had to bring there was homeschooling. Their kids were home, so they had to juggle that plus their working environment. So just being more, listening to everyone who's on your team, like understanding what's going on at home, kind of being more compassionate with all of that. That's definitely been something that we've been doing. As from a business perspective, it really forced us to move faster into a test and learn environment. I would say it's something that's always been very important to me in any of my prior roles as well, but we had to do it quick because we were in the middle of COVID when I first started. So we really had to kind of think outside of the box, outside of what we already knew was working, and how we can get ahead of the upcoming trends since they were shifting quite quickly throughout the last few months.
With so many changes in consumer behavior and evangelism among one another, and even communications channels during COVID, what kinds of changes do you think are going to be lasting? What consumer behavior and trends do you see as kind of new habits or new behavior that's formed that will continue post-COVID, when we can be in person with one another and in offices and in the classroom?
Yeah. I mean, for our business in particular, I think the self-consumption piece will be continuing post-COVID. You know, we were always known mostly as gifting, but I think now that everyone has realized how important their happiness is at home, I think it'll kind of continue even moving forward. I would say data driven has always been very important, but I think it's even more so during COVID, again, with everything changing so much, between different product shifts, between consumer behaviors, just really being sure that you understand how your customers are behaving, and targeting them appropriately is going to be really important. And then, you know, I think just testing and learning is also incredibly important on our end. And like I said, it was sort of fast tracked thanks to COVID, and we'll definitely continue to keep moving.
Awesome. It's so great that you've been able to find the silver lining, right? A catalyst to accelerating strategies and
Yeah,
accelerating projects, you know, despite these difficult times.
for
One
sure.
thing's for sure, I'm in, you know, such a variety of online meetings with such a variety of folks on the other side, and the increased number of plants and bouquets of flowers that I see in the background is something that I've noticed as well. And I know that folks are going to bring that into their offices, and teachers will bring that into their classrooms. So I think that we have a, you know, great future ahead.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Taryn. And thanks so much to Commerce Next. What a great opportunity to spend time together today. And we sure appreciate all of the audience members out there for your attention and focus. Taryn, it's wonderful to work with you, and I appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you so much, Jake.